Hi, my name is Mike Knutson. Today I'll be doing a presentation on securing the home network. This will include addressing a few vulnerabilities, some terms and language, and what are some simple things you can do to really harden your home network and leave yourself less vulnerable to potential attacks or malware. So, moving on. That's kind of what I just went over, and also a cliff note that I will provide some of my own thoughts on the idea. So we'll start with the components of the home network. Traditionally, everyone will have their connection to the internet backbone, which will be the ISP connection. That'll be where the internet enters your house, and this point is then usually will be connected to a modem and then a router, and possibly a modem router combined unit. The combined unit is less desirable than using an independent router modem because more often than not, the combination units don't get the same attention and support that the specialized products get. They are usually a few firmware levels behind. They don't have the same level of patching and the same level of dedication. Some of their features are not as well coded, so if you can, stick with a dedicated router and then a modem as opposed to using the combination unit. So where we'll start is the first thing to do to harden the home network would be to change the network configuration. So to do this, the first thing you do is you will enter a IP address into your browser URL, and this will pull you into your router management console. This address here might be a little bit different depending on which product you use. This is the standard for D-Link, and I believe Netgear possibly links this, but you should search your manufacturer and find the correct default entrance to the management console. Once you're in here, there'll be a number of settings you can change. A couple of them will be on this list. Some others I didn't include because unless you had a deeper understanding of what exactly they did, you could really affect your home network and your ability to function, essentially. So one of the first things that you should do is change all the default settings when it comes to naming and passwords. So right at the beginning, change the default admin account and the default admin password. This is because it will deter anyone from just trying to run a dictionary attack against the PC using all the known default combinations of passwords and admin names. With a dictionary attack, it shouldn't take very long at all for a computer to crack that wide open. So by changing from them defaults, you give yourself the ability to not just have someone come and run the established names against it and break it. Another thing you can do is you can disable the broadcast of the SSID. And you might go, what is an SSID? And if you look at this box in the bottom right corner, it is short for Service Set Identifier. It's essentially the broadcast name your Wi-Fi connection uses. It's plain language, plain text readable, so you can identify the devices and the connections. Disabling this, although if you can't be seen, it makes it much harder to be cracked or listened to or any malicious activity, but it also provides this advantage of nobody will be able to see your network. So you'll have to provide, in the exact case, your SSID to whoever tries to connect to your network. And it can be really annoying, if you would, I guess, lack of a better word, to have to provide the name and how to spell it every time along with the password. So I just leave broadcast on, but that's just my preference. The next step is, while you're in the configuration, is to ensure the encryption type is set right. So if you look on the right here, it kind of helps identify some of these options. WEP is an antiquated option that is no longer used. It is proven to be very faulty and not secure. So at this stage, the default standard that's really been accepted is the WPA2, which still has flaws and can be cracked, but requires dedicated computing time. It's pretty high that on a home network, you don't, unless you're hiding some kind of trade secrets or patents or something, I don't think you'd hide that much. So it's also important to set a strong password, one you don't share. This same policies that you use kind of for admin login. You want to be over 8 characters. You want a combination of upper, lower, and special characters. This is kind of where you get into the debate of if you think a passphrase is a stronger option or having a more complex password. I kind of lean toward believing that passphrases are a little better. They're easier to help people with and to pass out, but it's really up to the individual. So another thing that has to happen is the disabling of IPv6. IPv6 is internet addressing protocol that is to accommodate the end of IPv4 addresses. There's a couple different places where you can disable IPv6. You can either do it on the local network card by digging into the connection settings right here, or you can do it at the router level and disable it. And here's a little picture of a management console showing IPv6, IPv4, disable. And what that'll do is that'll allow you to not pass IPv6 traffic at all. And the problem, why you'd want to do that is IPv6 packets can be sent to your computer, which then get wrapped in an IPv4 container to allow them to be understood. And if you don't have any kind of security or any kind of rule set up to govern how these IPv6 packets come in, they pretty much come in and do whatever they want with zero routing, zero rules applied. So it could be possibly a bad situation because you're having packets hit your computer without any kind of processing or rules. So it's kind of wild west of how things happen. So the next topic of discussion is, after all these things are set, should you set up a guest network? Is it safer to have a guest network than it is to use your wireless network, and give them the password? For this, I think a guest network is something you should use. I have a lot of people come over to my own residence and want to use the Wi-Fi, and I don't feel super comfortable punching that hole and having my password out, and everyone's potentially unpatched phones or infected phones or mobile devices. So I use a guest network to isolate my computer or my network from my local area network. So if you look over here, you kind of see just a really easy guest access setup. So you'd set an SSID, there'd be your name, that'd be broadcast, stick with that encryption type, and then set a strong key for this. But the real issue is there's two different ways that guest networks are ran. There are some that happen on the access level, and then some that happen after a connection's already been semi-established. So what I mean by this is, some devices, when you try to connect to the wireless network, will immediately pop up an admin window requiring password and right there. That is optimal. What you don't want is there's one that, once you try to connect, kind of like the guest page at Metro State, it pulls up a splash page, which then you authenticate from the splash page. And when that happens, when you see that browser open, you're already farther in than you were in the other format when you just get the pop-up window. When you get that browser, you're already halfway in the door, so it really leaves you not in a good place, because the possibility for just passing of data has already happened. There's a couple things you can also do when it comes to the guest network. You can control the access length of how long their session is active. So if you want to restrict someone to an hour or 6 hours, say, so they will no longer be able to access it once their time limit is expired, that's one way. Or you can also do it by bandwidth, which would allow you to do, say, at a certain amount of data passed, pull their access. It's really up to the individual to decide, but with the Internet of Things and how dependent mobile networks are, I think it's huge to get the guest network set up. So ensure you have a router that can run it right and get it done. So that kind of ends it for when it comes to network configuration. The next component is making sure that you have a comprehensive security suite installed on all clients that are going to be connected to the network. So all PCs, laptops, if you're going to do anything, get it right. So decide on a preferred product, and then go look through the licensing options and make sure you find something that has a multi-device option, so that way you get a consistent product across the devices on your network. And once that's on there, make sure to keep it patched, make sure to keep your licensing current, because if you can't refresh your definitions, security definitions, you're not staying patched, you're just as exposed, and what's the point if you're not going to maintain it? And then the last step is one thing that often gets overlooked by most people, is the critical fact of backing up your data. There's so many scenarios where data wasn't backed up and is lost forever. I mean, it can let it be from exposure, from infection, from act of God, if you would. You can lose everything, so it's best to have redundant data. So depending on the size of your network and the demands, you can have a number of different configurations. So if you look at the first picture at the bottom, this would be a network SAN device, which does replication using RAID, and that you would wire into your network, and you'd set that up independently. And it may be a little large and a little expensive for the average user, especially if you're not doing much besides web browsing, email, and maybe gaming. If you had a lot of pictures, or you are a photographer for a living, this might be a good option because of the amount of space that video and picture files can eventually end up taking up. But for the average user, standard USB external HDD or SDD would probably be a good option. Just to have to set up a consistent schedule, do a full backup like once a month, and then you could do something where you did incremental or changes once a week and just kind of keep it up to date. And now with the cloud, the way it's developed, a OneDrive or a Google Drive could be used, and critical documents or important data could be kept in the cloud. So that might be also an option. That's actually going to be my last slide, I believe. I didn't quite get as many as I would have liked, but thank you for listening. This was my in a nutshell way to harden your home network. Thank you and goodbye.